Hey everyone, very good morning. How are you all? Thank you for joining in for the sixth webinar of the Navigating Net Zero session. Um, we'll probably wait for another 1 minute for others to join. We just have a few attendees today. In case we have a very few attendees, probably we can make it more interactive, I believe. So I've just enabled mic and camera for both of you, which is Brandon and Kim. It's up to you if you want to join in. All right, we are 5 minutes into the webinar. Uh, since we are a handful of people, why don't we make it interactive? This is Himanshu Prajapati. I am a sustainability consultant at Sustainium. We have Ravi with us as well as Vivek. We just have two attendees today, which is Kim and Brandon. If you guys want to join in, open your videos and audio, that'll be great. We can make it interactive. Probably let's see what you guys wanna um, uh, you know wanted from this particular webinar. Oh, we have Vita as well. Oh, that's amazing. All right, I don't see that people are responding, but let's move ahead in that case. So today's topic is ESG regulation in the US and Europe, and uh, what I intended to do is take people from the journey of ESG primarily, talk about the different aspects of ESG, how the ESG has evolved to its form as of now. Then talk about the various ESG frameworks, and then talk about the regulations which are currently there in US and Europe. So that's the plan for today. If people have a different idea, please go ahead and you can mention what you want from this particular webinar. Um, we'll quickly cover the evolution of ESG, and I suppose that many of you are already aware, but just for the sake of setting up the context in terms of sustainability and ESG, I think I've tried to put all the information regarding ESG over here since the 1800s to till date. You can see that ESG has evolved a lot over the last 100 years, and in it there were different forms of ESG. Of course, for example, till the 1980s, it was just about the social responsibility. So you saw the Chernobyl disaster in the 1980s. The Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility was founded in 1973. That is where the ESG shareholder advocacy also started. So this was the time when the social responsibility was the prime requirement. That is when all of this started. In 1985, we detected the ozone hole, and that is when an era of CSR initiated, the corporate social responsibility. This is also the time when in 1987, the Brundtland Commission, coined the term sustainability and intended to unify the countries around sustainable development. So this is also the time when CSR was building up, the corporate social responsibility was building up. In 1989, we saw the Exxon Valdez spill, which was one of the worst oil spills in the history of mankind. We also saw the first ESG index fund, which came out in 1990s. So this was an era of CSR, primarily, focusing on how the corporate can, develop the society, how this can be something that the corporates take responsibility on. The ESG primarily came out in its form in 2000 to 2015, where majority of the development has happened. So in 2000, we saw the carbon disclosure project, which came out in 2000, followed by GRI as well as UNGC. So GRI is a known ESG framework across the world, and that is something that is known to all the ESG related departments. All the ESG managers would know that they have to report in GRI, which is Global Reporting Initiative. The GRI itself has evolved a lot. We will speak about that as well. Subsequently, the UNPRI was also one of the major milestone, because this is the time that the principle of responsible investing was initiated, and a lot of investment firms participated in this. This was in 2006. 2011, we saw SASB, which came out, which is Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, uh, and that was founded. SASB is something that is utilized a lot in the US. This is something that happened in 2011, following which in 2015 we saw the launch of SDGs, which is Sustainable Development Goal. I think this is one term that everybody knows. 2015 was also a very important year with respect to the Paris Agreement, which was signed by 197 countries. This was a milestone because we agreed that the countries would take steps to adhere to 1.5-degree rise in global temperature by the end of the century, which is very important. It still stands today. Um, the TCFD framework was also launched in 2015. So, Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosure. This is something very important, and it has played a major role in the climate related disclosures. We also saw in 2018, the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, writing to the CEOs, considering long-term value of ESG rather than talking about the short-term investing, wherein people are talking about returns and returns. So this is an important milestone with respect to ESG as well. Now, 2015 and beyond, we saw ESG becoming a central business imperative, and it started, and it is still doing the same. It started making ESG as a mainstream strategy of the companies. So the company would primarily look at sustainable development, sustainability as a primary focus, and you can see that a lot in terms of the business meetings that are happening right now, the board meetings that are happening, and the related decisions. COVID-19 also accelerated the movement towards ESG, and in terms of issuance of green and social bonds. In 2021, I think this is one of the major breakthrough with respect to the financial world is Sustainable Financial Disclosure Regulation, which was launched in the US, and this is creating a lot of movement across the world. So, of course, not directly but indirectly, because it is impacting the investing. Of course, all of us are aware in 2024 CSRD reporting became mainframe from January of 2024. So this has been the evolution of ESG. People might say that ESG is something that has developed in the last 5 or 10 years, whereas it has taken almost around 50, 60, 70 years to develop to the stage where it is currently there. Now, having said this, I think it is also important to differentiate between sustainability and ESG. While we saw that the ESG in its current form of frameworks is little bit different than what sustainability is. Now, when we say what is sustainability and what is ESG and how they are different, I think in a very simple term, sustainability is the ability or to maintain or support a process continuously over time in a very broader term. But when we talk about the natural resources, I think the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance is a most apt definition of sustainability. A different version, of course, with respect to the United Nations, which has adopted, is the meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. I think this is the most human form of this, the definition of sustainability, uh, which I don't think you need to explain to anyone. On the other hand, I think ESG is basically an investing principle that prioritizes identification and mitigation of environmental issues, social issues, and implementation of corporate governance. So it is a much more structured way of, you know, adopting sustainability. So sustainability and ESG, I think, are both very much correlated. ESG is a much more structured way of implementation of sustainability. Now, there are, of course, a lot of ESG issues that come across our way. So when we talk about the environmental issues, it is the climate change, which encompasses the carbon emissions, the carbon footprint, the climate change vulnerability, which commonly is known as climate risk, the financing environmental impact, carbon taxes. These are some of the components of climate change. Whereas when we talk about natural capital, it is water stress, biodiversity and land use, raw material sourcing. When we talk about pollution and waste, it is toxic emissions and waste, packaging and material waste, and electronic waste. So, largely, climate change, natural capital, and pollution and waste related issues are part of the environmental issues. When we talk about social issues, it is largely divided in three sections. So, human capital, product services, liability, and stakeholder perspective. In human capital, of course, you know, how we treat our employees, the inclusion and diversity, health and safety, modern slavery, and human rights are something which are very important with respect to the social issues. With respect to the product services or liability, it is the product safety and quality, chemical safety, consumer financial protection, and privacy and data securities are something which are part of social issues. Uh, Stakeholder perspective, which is controversial sourcing, community relation, these are also very important for the organizations. With respect to governance issues, it is the corporate governance and corporate behavior. So, uh, issues related to board leadership, remuneration, differences between the CEOs and the employees. I think this is something which is discussed a lot. Responsibility and accountability of the business towards the employees as well as towards uh, the consumer. Audit risk and internal control, these are something which are key to corporate governance. Following which, when we talk about corporate behavior, it is tax transparency, responsible investing, business ethics, and inclusivity and fairness. I think these are the key components of governance issues. So, yeah, hey Kim, I
Hi,
see that.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Wonderful, thanks. So I'm Kim Elliott. I've been in EHS for about 20 years. I'm currently with a startup
Amazing.
and looking for today's webinar to gain just more background on ESG and its granular differences between EHS and ESG.
Okay. Sorry, is that the question, or you have
Mm-hmm.
something more
Yes.
to say?
No, that's more of the specifics. Kind of being the only EHS player here, it's important to be able to gravitate towards what are the things that I need to be able to issue or be able to talk about, especially when it comes to the environmental issues. So EHS has been a little bit of a pivot from what the ESG is offering. And my prior company had a group that specifically worked on ESG. So now where I'm currently at, it's all on me. So that's what I'm trying to gain out of this webinar.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning the same. The current webinar today is primarily focused on ESG, so it's not like I am gonna cover EHS specifically. But having said that, EHS, I believe, is part of ESG, wherein you're talking about primarily the environmental and social issues, and less of governance issues. And EHS also differs from one type of company to the other. For an example, when we talk about the construction industry and the manufacturing industry, the EHS plays a major role. Whereas when you talk about the corporate function, or let's say an IT company, EHS takes a back step in that case. So it is more related to the type of industry that you are servicing. Um, so I think primarily that is what we are going to talk about today. In terms of ESG, we are going to cover the entire plethora. But are you specifically looking at any particular element with respect to EHS that you'd want me to cover?
Not specifically for EHS, just looking at with ESG, what are the specifics in terms of any, metrics that need to go out or things that we need to ensure we're governing. Again, we are in manufacturing and a startup, but again, the ESG role was a completely separate team where I came from prior, which was Tesla, and they had their own team for ESG, and EHS was its own lane.
Sure, absolutely. Probably we can have a follow-up conversation about EHS and what all KPIs are there. I've not covered all the KPIs today, uh, and I'm sorry about that, but I believe that I can give you all the answers related to EHS in the following conversation or a following webinar. Hope that works. All right. Thanks, Kim. Let's move ahead. So we were talking about ESG issues. We've just covered what is sustainability and ESG and what are ESG issues. Let's quickly talk about the ESG frameworks. When we talk about frameworks, there are quite a lot of ESG frameworks out there, to be very honest. Not possible to cover in half an hour. It'll take probably 3-4 hours to actually go talk about all of those regulations or frameworks. But let's talk about the prominent ones and what are the major differences. So you see that there are reporting frameworks, there are benchmarks and scoring, and there are target setting frameworks. So the most common one, which I have mentioned already, is GRI. Now, GRI has several standards, and it is primarily a framework which allows companies to report their ESG matrices. Now, when I say ESG matrices, GRI has different standards. So, for an example, uh, GRI 301, 302 would be talking about emissions, talking about water. Um, the GRI 102 will talk about general disclosures. GRI 103 will talk about materiality approach. So all of these are specific standards. It does not matter whether you are reporting all of them or not. But if you're reporting, let's say, energy, which is 301, then you would have to follow those particular KPIs. So the reporting framework here, specifically GRI, does not mandate that you have to cover all the standards under GRI, but it does tell you if you are going to report a particular aspect or particular area which is material to the business, then this is how you have to do. So specifically going back to what a reporting framework is, it will just give you a guidance how to report. Similarly, TCFD is also one of the frameworks wherein the moment you say that this is something that I have to report, or I'm going ahead with TCFD, it is got a framework with there are 4 sections, and you have to talk about targets and metrics, talk about business, talk about how the risks are material to the company or not. So all of these are part of TCFD framework. So it does not give you that you have to disclose a particular aspect or a particular KPI, but it talks about how you have to disclose. CSRD has a similar format, but in case of CSRD, it is very much detailed, much more than probably TCFD has, for an example. Then there are benchmarks or scorings. So for an example, DJSI, which is Dow Jones Sustainability Index, would actually rate you, or when I say you, the company, of course, it will rate the companies with respect to their ESG initiatives. Similarly, GRESB would score a particular real estate or real estate investment trust with respect to their ESG performance. And we have, of course, green building certifications also, which are not directly ESG, but they're a part of ESG. Uh, Thereafter, we have the target setting frameworks. So frameworks like CDP, SBTI, the SDGs, which are more like a guidance in terms of setting your goals. When you are setting, for an example, if you want to set a net zero goal, you go and follow the science-based targets. You can also adhere to CDP for the same, and of course, everybody knows that there are 17 SDGs, which allow companies to target those which are relevant to their businesses and set targets according to that. I think these are the three major, ESG frameworks, major types of ESG frameworks rather, which everybody should know, which are applicable to a particular um, sector or company, or rather in a particular region, for an example. So there are, of course, different sets of ESG frameworks which are more popular in one country than in another. So I hope the difference is clear to everyone with respect to the reporting frameworks, the benchmarks of scoring, and the target setting frameworks. I have covered only a few in this particular slide just to give an example, uh, but there are a lot more out there which are relevant to companies. Um, are there any questions on this?
No, this was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Moving ahead, let's talk about the ESG regulations in the United States and the Europe. Quickly talking about the ESG regulation in the US, we have uh, the regulations by SEC, which is primarily on climate risk disclosure. Uh, so in 2001 and 2000, 2021 and 2022, the SEC came out with this regulation, and or rather formulated it, and this is what is the current requirement with respect to the SEC regulations. It has got four primary components, which is the climate risk disclosure, the deferred disclosures, which is scenario analysis, internal carbon pricing and transition plan, the GHG disclosures, and the inline XBRL. So these are the four major component of the ESG regulation by the SEC. Now, of course, the SEC, the regulation applies to all the filers, which is large accelerated filer, non-accelerated filers, and the small reporting company, as well as the emerging growth company. You can find out about what large accelerated filers, as well as, excuse me, non-accelerated filer SEC and EGCs are. So of course they have got a range. If there is for a particular range of revenue, a company and number of employees, the company can be called as a large accelerated filer, or an accelerated filer, or SEC and EGC. Sorry, SRC and EGC. So it is very clear that SEC wants companies to start reporting their climate related disclosures, as well as the GHG disclosures. So in the GHG disclosure, it is primarily the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. only if it is found material to the company. So it is important to understand that as of now, scope 3 is not entirely there, but scope 1 and scope 2 are definitely there for all the companies. So the timeline, as you can see, it starts from 2025. So wherein the large accelerated filer has to report their financial statement as well as the climate risk disclosure, following which they have to disclose the GHG emissions in 2026. For the same, the large accelerated filers will have to assure their GHG emissions in 2029, starting 2029, and go for a reasonable assurances 2033. So there's still a lot of time in terms of assurance for the large accelerated filers. But at the same time, they have to start accounting for their GHG emissions, and they have to start looking at their climate risk disclosures right now, so that they'd be able to do it in 2025, and followed by the GHG in 2026. This is something that the large accelerated filers, so the very large companies, would definitely do. With respect to the accelerated filers, they are starting 1 year late, so 2026, they would be releasing their climate risk disclosure, followed by the deferred disclosures, and in 2028, their GHG emissions. So when I talk about deferred disclosure, it is the scenario analysis, the internal carbon pricing, and the transition plan with respect to climate-related disclosures. So that is something that is required by all these companies. In case of the non-accelerated filers, SRCs and EGCs, which is small reporting company and emerging growth companies, the requirement is only to disclose a climate related disclosure and deferred disclosure. They are not required to disclose their GHG emissions as of now. And there are no requirement with respect to assurance for non-accelerated filers, SRCs and EGCs. Uh, Lastly, in case of inline XBRL, which is primarily adherence of reporting, says that your reports are machine readable also. So basically, this is almost similar to EU taxonomy, wherein you are following a particular sets of keywords to identify a particular KPI. When once that happens, it is easier for the machine to read the report. So which is the primary requirement of these. So inline XBRL allows machine readable reports which can easily be imported into a machine, and all the relevant KPIs can be scanned through, and benchmarking can be done by anyone. So this is also one of the key requirements currently applicable to the accelerated filer and non-accelerated filer in 2026 and 2027. Um, so this is the current requirement with respect to the climate-related disclosure uh, for by the SEC. There is also a very important regulation in the California, or rather two regulations, which the first one is the Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act, which is commonly known as SB 253, as well as a greenhouse gas climate related financial disclosure, which is SB 261. Now you can see that here as well, you know, um, the requirement is primarily on scope 1, 2, and 3 GHG emissions, as well as climate related financial disclosure, which is something that the SEC is already pushing. The effective dates, of course, are different over here. So here in this case, for the Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act, which is SB 253, it is starting in 2026. Um, Now there has been some changes with respect to the effective dates. The proposed dates are 2028 and 2029 for Scope 1, 2, and Scope 3. Uh, Same is the case for assurance requirements. These are recently changed. These are proposed changes, but they have not been adopted as of now. It is still being deliberated, and it is yet to be notified in terms of acceptance. But as of now, Hey, Kim. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just wondering if anybody else on the call is also in California. This is exactly what I'm talking about the basically the new pieces that are part of, EHS as a whole, where you have to absorb ESG in these, the Accountability Act and all of these new bills. So this is exactly what I'm talking about specific to my state. So thank you for bringing this up.
Absolutely. Uh, Great. Um, so since I was talking about there's been some changes with respect to the effective dates and assurance requirement. These have been notified, but they have not been adopted yet. So unfortunately, this moves the disclosure requirement from 2026 to 2028. Similarly, for the SB 253 as well as for SB 261, it is moved from 2025 to 2027. In terms of the assurance requirement, the earlier requirement was for a limited assurance from 2026, but that has been moved from 2026 to 2028. And in case of scope 3, the limited assurance requirement will start from 2032. I hope the requirements are very clear. Any questions on the SEC and the SB 253 and 261 regulations?
Hi there. This is Brandon.
Hi,
I have
Brandon.
a quick question on the SEC regulations. Um, I know for a while they were challenged in court after
Yeah.
the decision, and with the new administration, I would assume not supporting them as well. What are your thoughts on the chance that they are still intact and still relevant going forward?
I I I think from my perspective, whether or not they're notified and they're mandatory to be adopted, they are certainly being pushed by the investors because these regulations are investor friendly. To be very honest, uh, one survey that I think KPMG did uh, with all the CEOs regarding these regulations clearly indicated that more than 90% of the CEOs are going ahead with the disclosures requirements, whether or not it is notified by the SEC or not. So I think, irrespective of what happens with respect to the mandates, the industry is is shifting towards the climate-related disclosures as well as the other ESG disclosures like GHG or TCFD or anything else. So all of that are automatically happening. And in case of large companies, you see that at least 4 or 5 years have gone past since they've started releasing their ESG report or a sustainability report. So all of it is already there. They just need to follow the particular format for SEC, to be very honest.
Okay,
I
thank
don't know.
you.
I mean, these are my thoughts. What do you think about this, Brandon? What
Yeah,
has been your experience?
it's tough because I think when there are regulations that are mandatory, obviously, companies have to adopt them. But I agree with you that there are a lot that are voluntary, and we still see companies, and especially my clients, still report to those as well. So I'm hoping that I can have your confidence for the future as well. That will be the case here too. And to answer Kim's question, I'm not based in California, but I do have clients that are, and so
Hmm.
I think having those regulations, including those here, was really helpful. To thank you because those do impact the clients that I have that have operations in California.
Great. Thank you for that. I think we all agree, and we are on the same page regarding the same. And we have, I mean, if you have been in this industry for at least 5 years, you've seen that change happening, whether or not there is a mandate for those regulations or not. So it's clearly there. Anyhow, shall we move ahead?
Sure.
Quickly covering the ESG regulation in the Europe. I know there are a lot of them, but we have a very less time. It's already uh, 8 minutes um, more than what we had planned. But let me quickly cover CSRD because CSRD is something that is coming up and that is relevant to Europe. And in some way or the other, it will be adopted by other countries as well. The CSRD reporting is something which has evolved for the last 4 or 5 years, and that has been adopted by most of the European countries. Here in this case, the objective and scope of CSRD reporting is to mandate the reporting requirement, um, move towards digitization, which is the XBRL format, which you also saw with SEC. Implement an assurance requirement for the ESG data, and broaden the scope of sustainability reporting. Also introducing the concept of double materiality, wherein we not just talk about the impact of the company's operation on the environment, but also the impact of the environment on the company's financial materiality. So basically talking about, if you don't take action, how the company has to cover the environmental and social risks through change in strategy. So the double materiality is something that is key with respect to CSRD, and that is uh, I've already seen companies adopting CSRD, or at least adopting double materiality in their disclosures, or in their strategy rather. So CSRD is a very important one. The reporting timeline, of course, here is it has already started. So companies which have to um, have their reports in 2025, so they would have to start from January 2024. So they must have already done in 2025. So these are NFRD companies. So NFRD is an earlier version of the CSRD reporting, wherein which is non-financial reporting directive. So all the companies which were covered in NFRD are to start reporting in January 2025. That means they have to release the report in Jan of 2025. Sorry, when I say January 2025, that means this is the year that you have to release the report for the reporting period, which is January 2024. In phase two, which is large companies, they have to start reporting from 1st Jan of 2025. That means their compliance report is due in 2026. For listed SMEs, which excludes micro enterprises, the reporting starts from January 2026, wherein the first compliance report comes out in 2027. Now, apart from all these companies, non-EU companies must also report, which have operation in the US, in the EU. They also have to start reporting from January of 2028. So this is also very important in case you have any offices in the Europe, uh, or a partial operation, or a subsidiary or a group company over there. You will have to start reporting on CSRD very soon. That is in January of 2028. Now, having said this, the disclosure requirement for CSRD is to have both financial and non-financial disclosures. The financial uh, disclosures include traditional financial statement, along with the information of how sustainability risk and opportunities affect the financial performance and position of the company. So this is very important with respect to the disclosure. In terms of the mandatory general disclosure requirement, you this is almost aligned with TCFD, if you've ever seen TCFD, which is governance, strategy and business model, impact, risk and opportunities, and metrics and targets. These are the four sections which are mandatory to be disclosed as part of CSRD. And then, of course, there are detailed disclosures on topics related to ESG. So this is what currently encompasses CSRD. If you see in terms of the adoption, I believe at least around 50 to 60% of the European countries have already adopted it. Some of them are in draft um, position, wherein they are awaiting final adoption. But mostly you can see that it is being adopted across Europe. So that's all about CSRD for now. I think in this given time, this is what we could cover with respect to the major regulations in the US and Europe. If you guys have any questions, I can cover it up now.
What's the best way to contact you? Can you post either your email or where I can follow up with you, or even get a copy of your slide deck? That'd be great.
Surely I can certainly do that. Probably you can reach out to us at hello@sustainame.io and we'll write back to you.
Great.
Or
Thank you so much.
yeah, you also can write to me at himanshu.prajapati. I think my name is there. I'll just put it in the chat and you can take it from there as well. Um, so that's all that we have today. Quickly talking about the Sustainame platform. Right now, we do have a carbon accounting platform wherein you can, go for carbon accounting of the company's operations and eventually, use this for reporting. Right now, we are supporting BRSR, which is an Indian ESG reporting, and very soon we'll be coming out with CSRD as well. But nevertheless, the GRI and SASB alignment is already there with respect to our platform. So do explore our platform, or you can also write to us. We'll give you a demo in terms of what we offer and how we can help you in terms of your ESG reporting. All right, if there are no questions, probably we can wrap up today's webinar. I think it's 15 minutes past what we had planned. But good, great interacting with both Brandon and I think she's left now. Great, thank you, thanks a lot. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Himanshu. This was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care.